Hi, Sergey. How are you? Thank you for joining today.
Hi, Hasan. It is my pleasure. Always
Uh,
happy to.
sure. So I'm joining from New York. Which part of the world are you in right now?
I am joining from Eastern Europe, from Latvia, actually, where I grew up, interestingly enough. But I am pretty frequently switching places, so might not hold for long in terms of the current location.
Okay, fair enough. So we are gonna talk about something very interesting today, which is longevity. We all wanna stay longer in this world, this beautiful world. So let's start, right?
Shoot,
Okay,
happy to
cool.
answer.
Can you tell us what Long VC does and what areas of science and technology you invest in?
Yeah, so LongeVC One, so the first fund of ours, was basically created as an early stage vehicle to fund early stage longevity tech. Right? It was created very much around the previous network, relationships and knowledge that we, as managing partners, myself and two other managing partners, co-founders in the fund, have accumulated throughout the years in the industry. And so some of us were business angels who started to deploy capital in longevity tech, AI for drug discovery, for example, really early. Some of us, as myself, were founders primarily, either building our own companies before in biotech or helping others build their companies in early stage clinical. So we kind of came to the fund's idea in a very organic way, if you wish, right? So we created it around our ability to source deals and our ability to access early tech, really, on the one hand, and on the other hand, around our relationships and first-hand relationships, really, with the KOLs in the industry, so key opinion leaders in the industry. And this is how LongeVC was basically created. It was created featuring one of the best and most prominent scientific advisory boards there is in the longevity space as of now. And you can kind of skim through it on longevc.com. Everyone is listed there. And around our network of where we actually get deal allocations from and how we participate in deals. Now, in terms of the focus of the fund, we do not approach, this is very important. So we do not approach longevity as a discipline of creating a magic pill. That's frankly rubbish, right? So it doesn't really work that way. And magic pill would most probably never exist anyway. So as a VC, we're pretty pragmatic. So we invest in tech that prolongs health span. So it's health span, always health span over lifespan, right? So lifespan as such, you're not interested in, you're interested in prolonging health span. Now, to prolong health span, you can do multiple things. You can either get on the angle of tackling age-related diseases, or you can invest in more sort of visionary fundamental tech of systemic rejuvenation and just prolonging life as such, if we're talking about a healthy individual. As a VC, again, we take a very pragmatic angle where we focus mostly around certain therapeutic areas, right? So as a fund, we invest essentially in three major pillars, right? So the first pillar is therapeutics, and this is where we deploy in preclinical stage companies in most known age-related disease areas. So oncology, neurodegenerative, cardiovascular. So sort of your usual suspects that end our lives prematurely, at least sort of in the Western civilization for sure. So the second pillar of ours is super early diagnostics and personalized care. So how do you catch diseases super early without even letting them to develop, right? So preventive care is a priority here. As well as how do you tailor existing protocols in an already disease burden population to increase the response rate in patients. So essentially to increase the efficacy and to make the protocol tailored to specific patients' needs. And then the third pillar of ours is infrastructure. And because of our historic relationships as investors with Insilico Medicine, which is now pretty much the AI for drug discovery company, right? And the company has created the whole AI for drug discovery space pretty much single-handedly. Infrastructural component for us is where we look at drug discovery platforms, where we look at novel sequencing methods, AI for drug discovery, essentially everything that helps us to design new drugs faster and put these drugs through validation in a faster pace versus the traditional approaches in pharma. I must say, though, that the infrastructural component is very often overlooked by longevity-focused funds or longevity narrative in general. So longevity narrative in general seems to be more lifestyle-related very often, but it is of crucial importance because, well, in order to create longevity-focused drugs, we basically need the infrastructure to generate or to iterate rather multiple options in the shortest time period possible, right? And with current capacities, drug discovery capacities, and kind of the traditional approaches, we just cannot afford it. So yeah, that's a lengthy answer, but I hope it kind of gives the perspective of where we look at as a VC. And it is very important to reemphasize that we do not really invest in holistic theses of let's make people younger. That doesn't work for a venture capitalist because venture capitalists look at where you enter, where you exit, what type of value you bring, and what sort of timeline are you trying to work against, right? And the timeline is normally a result of being focused around a specific therapeutic indication or around a specific R&D timeline, right? So this is where we sit.
I really appreciated the way you answered. It's pretty elaborative. I hope whoever is listening is gonna help them. So I would ask, like, can you give us some names at this moment that startups which are really exciting, even though you invested in or you didn't invest, but you are very excited about.
There are a bunch of those. I mean, it depends on how you really. Again, it depends on what's your definition of longevity, right? So if we go by our pragmatic definition of longevity, there are many. Current Bio, one of our portfolio companies, does epigenetic reprogramming. One of the major competitors for Altus Labs, which is founded and funded by Jeff Bezos. So epigenetic reprogramming obviously kind of holds huge hope in terms of longevity focused tech, because it essentially allows you to rewind the cells back in time, or rather restore the functions that the cells once had, but they lost them because of aging and DNA damage and epigenetic damage. So that's and TrimBio is focused around certain disease indications already. So it's not just holistic tech; it's actually found a way into specific applications. So that's great. You have other companies in the field. If we're talking like longevity tech specifically, Rubido Life Sciences is a great one in senescent cells. So in the senescent cell field, and senescent cells is again another huge bracket of research in longevity. We have interesting consumer-focused companies. For example, in the gut microbiome space, one of our recent investments is AntiBiome, who is one of these super rare consumer-focused companies working on the gut-brain axis, essentially, and tackling it through personalization of supplements, certain types of supplements, which have clinical data. So the company actually has clinical data to prove the ground, which is very uncommon for the supplement space to begin with. In mental health, you have people like Freedom Bio, for example, which is a Yale company that has developed a substantially reformulated version of ketamine, which doesn't have common side effects in depression treatment and essentially in all the other specifically drug-resistant depression conditions, where you don't have the substance abuse risk, but you have a prolonged effect at a fraction of a cost versus the traditional drugs out there. And mental health is a huge pillar of longevity in general, right? And it kind of just segues through everything, starting from age-related disease treatments all the way to the lifestyle interventions. I mean, mental health is of paramount importance. We recently got, so 2 weeks ago, one of our portfolio companies, Unnatural Products, UNP, just announced a deal with, it's a drug discovery platform, announced a deal with Merck, a $220 million deal with Merck in the oncology space. So that's a nice development as well. So there are many, really, there are many. And as you've already noticed, I mean, we're looking at the segment in a pretty focused way on the one hand, but on the other hand, we kind of distinguish and we acknowledge very different pillars that kind of contribute to the whole longevity picture in a very functional way. So there are plenty.
Okay, it's a pretty different world. Some of the startups I'm familiar with, some of the startup I never heard of, but I'll definitely dig into it. It's pretty interesting place. However, can you tell me a little bit about like the use of AI in longevity tech, not just in drug discovery on analyzing medical data?
Well, again, AI has been a bit of a buzzword recently, right? And it does really depend on how you look at it. It has certainly found application as an aid in diagnostics. So AI has found a very organic application in radiology, in assisting physicians essentially with primary diagnosis, etc. So that's one of the areas. AI for drug discovery is indeed another area, and this is where AI generated a dramatic paradigm shift, because before that, you would spend 2 years designing a new drug. Now you can spend 30 days designing a new small molecule, right? And in pharma terms, this is like infinity, right? I mean, this is miles in between of what we had and what we have now, and this is where AI for drug discovery is already finding its way into clinic. So companies like in silico medicine already have AI designed assets in phase 2. So that's pretty cool. Then of course you have AI in all sorts of advisory roles when it comes to lifestyle interventions and kind of lifestyle type of self-cautious longevity, fitness, diet, etc. Sorry, the Eastern European cold, it just doesn't let me go.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, and then you have all sorts of drug discovery platforms in general that focus on specific fields, such as gut microbiome, and looking at specific bacterial strains and how the metabolites from these bacterial strains affect certain inflammation markers. And then you have essentially AI to optimize these models for you. Then you have AI in kind of a neighbor segment, really, as a part of the bigger game, which is called secondary health data use, right? And this is where we essentially are, as humanity, as a society, as regulatory bodies, we're figuring out how to use clinical data, which we have accumulated in hospitals and in other institutions, in the most efficient way, in order to be able to create more efficient models when it comes to drug design, or more predictive models when it comes to, let's say, diagnostics, et cetera, et cetera. And this is where AI is a part of the picture in federated learning approaches, or any other sort of secondary health data use approaches. So, yeah, I mean, again, it's a bit of a buzzword in the current state of things. Mostly found its way, obviously, in drug discovery platforms and drug design. But then again, it also has like a healthy application in the lifestyle, as well as even physician assist and radiology, which is like the most obvious example.
Okay, cool. So let me shift gear a little bit. You must know Peter Thiel, legendary VC investor. He's also investing in longevity tech, and as far as the news goes, it's he also changes blood, I believe, from a young person. What's your thought on that? So he buys young blood and he puts it in his body. And one of the Bloomberg interview, he talked about he's gonna stay alive until 120 years. What's your thought on those? Like, are those myth or you know?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Peter was the one claiming this. Maybe it was Brian. Brian does the same thing. I think Brian Johnson.
Yes.
So what I think about it. I mean, look. So in every let me start from the other way around. So in every technological space, especially at the point where the space is just developing and kind of creating the first wave, and you have these early adopters and sort of early visionaries of whatever kind. You kind of need people that would sometimes go into the extreme of demonstrating what the space is capable of and showing others of what works and what not, right? So, and if we're talking about the examples of, let's say, Brian Johnson, then he's doing exactly that. Is Brian's routine for everyone? No. In terms of blood transfusions and all the other interventions he's doing. Is it educational? Well, absolutely, right? Is he courageous enough to try sometimes pretty experimental stuff, sometimes pretty unproven stuff actually on himself? Absolutely. So he's basically using his own money to run a transparent and kind of televised clinical trial on himself and report the results to the world. So in terms of popularization of the field, he is actually doing tremendous work, right? And I'm absolutely not prepared to say whether this is he's doing something wrong. I mean, I don't think he is. It's just his level of tolerance towards what he's capable of and what he's willing to test on himself, right? Now, when it comes to blood transfusions, I mean, it's a pretty truth be told. I mean, there is a concept which is called parabiosis, right? So, parabiosis is mostly done on mice in the lab setting, and this is where you literally sew together a young mouse and an old mouse, right? So you basically unite their cardiovascular systems, and you look at how an older mouse feels when it gets the blood and kind of the products of metabolism of the younger one, and you actually see that the old mouse benefits from that. So the old mouse actually gets younger when you sew them together and you physically like join them together. And parabiosis is extensively described, and one of our advisors in the fund actually, Vadim Vladishev. So he runs what is the biggest and the most well-funded, I think, aging research labs in Harvard Medical School. And it's aging specifically as an endpoint, right? So it's not diseases; it's actually aging as a process. And he has done a lot of experiments in parabiosis, and it is essentially a blood transfusion, but through uniting a constant blood transfusion through uniting cardiovascular systems. So in animals, it has proven to work. In humans, and humans, of course, are a bit more complex organism versus a mouse. I might assume that might work as well in one way or another in terms of certain biomarkers, right? It might sound a bit bizarre, right, when you talk about it, but as a procedure, it might as well work and improve some biomarkers. Yes.
Wow, that's great. That's really great. Wow. So yeah, since you brought up Brian, I studied about him since 2021. Whatever he is doing, it's gonna help the entire community. But I don't know how much percentage he's actually right at this point. So you just brought this up. Yeah, it's true. Um, so why now? Why all the billionaires are investing in longevity tech? I mean, what's your thoughts on this? And don't you think it's like a over investment is not gonna be good for the community of the startups or something? What's your thought on this?
Don't think it's an overinvestment. I think it's an underinvestment, and here's why.
Okay.
I think what we are starting to understand as a society in general is that age-related diseases and longevity is pretty much the biggest problem we have. So the biggest problem we have is not software as a service. It's not cryptocurrency. It's not GDP growth to a fraction of a percent in this year or that year, right? And these are all important, of course. But on the fundamental level, what we need to solve are essentially the questions of our existence, the questions of our premature death, and the questions of our understanding how to delay premature death. And I'm not talking about living forever straight away and not dying at all. What I'm talking about is essentially dying in a much more at a much more comfortable pace while retaining your healthy human performance for an amount of time as long as possible, right? So if you look at the whole situation critically, cardiovascular diseases, cancer has gone dramatically younger. Cardiovascular diseases have gone dramatically younger. Part of it is due to the lifestyle, but part of it is due to other reasons. We, in the 21st century, as a society, we're trying to build the rocket to Mars, and we're trying to do all the other great things. We do not know why Alzheimer occurs, right? We do not know. We don't know the reason why Alzheimer's or Parkinson's actually happens. We can understand what are the caveats of like what happens when the disease is happening. So what are the signs of the disease? But the actual root cause of the disease is still unknown, right? Yet we are trying to do all these other great things. So I think that we are actually witnessing a dramatic shift in the understanding of the society of what really matters. And the reason why it comes from billionaires, and the way, and it's always like this always has, or very often has, a very negative sort of connotation of like, oh, billionaires want to live forever. Partially, it might be true, right? And it's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if someone who has money wants to invest in R&D, and contributes to the research community in the process, either he or she is motivated by living longer or just helping humanity is none of my concern. What my concern is it pushing us forward as a field of thought, and as an academic community, for example, as a research community. So, and then the other part of it is, I think what billionaires and kind of the wealthy ones of this world understand is that having earned a significant amount of money, the existential problems still do not go anywhere, right? So you still acknowledge, and I think you acknowledge it at a whole new degree of clarity, that longevity or age-related diseases, premature death, prolonging of health span, whatever you want to call it, is pretty much your biggest concern. Because as of now, money cannot solve it, right? So I am looking at this actually as a more conscious and strategically grounded deployment of resources. And I don't care that much if it's, for someone's good or for humanity's good, as long as it benefits everyone in the process. I'm totally up for it. I also think that longevity is going to dominate as a field, is going to totally dominate biotech in the next 10 years. I think that the next blockbuster drug and blockbuster treatment, the paradigm shifting treatment that will end up in big pharma and eventually will end up in the broader population will be a longevity drug, or at least a drug with what we in the industry call a significant longevity dividend, right? So and by blockbuster drug I mean something equal to an effect of, let's say, GLP-1, so the weight loss drugs, the Ozempics of the world that are now sort of rocking the whole scene, or anti-PD-1 drugs in cancer back in 2014. So something that has the potential of radically kind of shaking up the whole field. So yeah, I think it's underinvestment, really. I think it's underinvestment, and I think people start to acknowledge the right problems.
Right. So I was going to ask you that. Do you have any names for those drugs? You already named one, like Ozempic or maybe some others. What's your thought on NMN? Like, do you think it's a longevity drug or is just a myth? NMN.
It wasn't a drug per se. I mean, so according to FDA now, FDA would actually, I think, has already started or is now starting to look at NMN as something that you cannot just sell online, right? So essentially giving it a drug status. But in reality, so it is a useful supplement with an asterisk, useful, and I'll explain why. It is a useful supplement that one can actually, and I'm trying to voice it out in like the most digestible way possible. One can actually use after 40 ish, right, to accelerate certain processes in your cells, right? So to essentially give yourself some extra cells some extra fuel, put it that way. So why there is an asterisk? Well, because my biggest question to NAD plus NMNs, whatever you supplements, NMNs, whatever you want to call it, simping, is I am not sure how do you really differentiate what types of cells you are feeding. So your body is, every single moment, your T cells, your immune system is killing off a bunch of cancer cells, just not letting them to develop, right? But if you have, and it's sort of this, and it's like this quasi-stable balance, if you're healthy and your immune system is working well. If you started to develop cancer, though, and if you have these cells accumulating somewhere and successfully hiding from the immune system, I so far do not have a conviction that by taking NMN supplements, you would not be also stimulating cancer cell growth. Because ultimately, you do not differentiate between which cells are you feeding in a way, right? And cancer cells are actually much more active in taking up any resource essentially that helps them grow and helps them maintain themselves. So if the question is, normally I get the question of whether I take supplements in general, and my answer now is I do. I do use the supplements from one company, which is AntiBiome, which is our portfolio company, and these are gut supplements. Highly recommended. You can feel the difference in energy levels. You can feel the difference in gut performance, digestion, everything, depending on what type of problems you had before, right? But NMNs, I have not taken myself, although I'm still too young. So I'm 32, and in my case, NMNs would not make any difference because my own NAD levels are still, are still okay.
So you said the name of the company is AntiBiome, right?
AntiBiome, ANI.
Okay, AntiBiome.
AntiBiome.
And
you can check them out. I mean, you can check them out in our portfolio section.
Oh, sure.
In LongeVC.com, and the guys are top notch. They're great. I think they did a great job gathering clinical evidence to prove that their solution actually works. They have, just the right personalization angle to kind of personalize supplements to your exact needs because you communicate with their app, which is, by the way, AI-based. One of the examples of how AI is used. So yeah, try them out. Awesome. Order a test kit. You might be super happy at the end.
Right. I will definitely try. I have a fascination about this type of medication, or you can say drugs or whatever.
You should.
Yeah.
Well, it's medical. It's medical food. It's medical food.
Yeah,
it's not a drug. It's medical food.
Right. Yeah. So you already answered a couple of the questions that I would ask you, but hey, I'm really liking the conversation. I hope you can stay with me until the end. But if you really want to
Sure.
leave, we'll plan for part two. I'm really liking it. I hope the listeners are gonna love this too whenever it's gonna be on YouTube. So the next question is related to the last answer you gave me. Connection between our gut health and overall well-being. Can you just simple terms explain?
So one can write a book on it, right? The underlying takeaway here is gut is, surprisingly enough, super underexplored. So where you can kind of compare it with everyone is like familiar with this fact that our brain is only X% studied, right? Where we don't really know how the brain works per se. So like our understanding is still very limited in terms of how subconsciousness works and consciousness and etc. So we can do basic stuff with it, but still like our deep understanding is lacking. Something like this happens on the gut level as well, where you have essentially billions of bacteria strains in your gut. Your microbiome changes, few times, sometimes few times a day, right? And we still are at the very basic level of understanding, let's say, what strains of bacteria affect what. The researchers and people that are invested, let's say, academically invested into microbiome hypothesis, which I like, would say that we might end up in the situation where we at some point prove that gut actually controls you. Like your gut and the bacteria strains in your gut actually control you, and that relates to your mental health. That relates to your ability to concentrate. That relates to your food cravings, to your metabolism, to the way your immune system works and responds, all the way down to your ability to tackle certain age-related diseases such as cancer. More to that, some of the hypotheses around because the last dominating hypothesis in the neurodegenerative space, talking about Alzheimer's specifically, right, was recently pretty much, well, not debunked, but it kind of proved throughout 20 years of research, it has proved to be not that viable, right? So one of the alternative hypotheses for why Alzheimer's happens is systemic inflammation, right? Is systemic inflammation or at some point autoimmunity, and systemic inflammation is very much or can be very much gut regulated, right? So by certain interventions in the gut, for example, personalized metabolites, you can lower systemic inflammation and then potentially lower the risk of Alzheimer's or slow the progression of the disease. So gut is sort of the gateway into, and I'm sure some people might blame me now for being too generalistic or not expanding on some of these things, but I'm just trying to give you kind of the full picture. And the picture is gut is basically the gateway, can be the gateway into how we look at certain processes, age-related diseases, and just the way you function in a whole different way, right? So there is this thing which is called the gut-brain axis, not the axis, but axis, AXIS, or the axis, right? Which basically stands for, your gut kind of affects how your brain works on the biochemical level. Has to do with your happiness, again, concentration levels, mental health. You can tackle depression through gut. You not talking about basic digestion problems and whatever. We actually have one interesting portfolio company in the gut space, which is called Interface Bio. So they are a drug discovery platform that is able to isolate certain strains of full cycle drug discovery. So isolate certain strains of bacteria, then take the metabolites, and metabolites are kind of the products of life of bacteria. Like metabolites is what bacteria produces when it lives. So they take metabolites produced by certain strains, and then they look at how these metabolites affect common inflammation markers in humans, right? And that, again, as well, might be a gateway into tackling certain diseases which are now kind of undruggable. In inflammatory bowel disease, and all the way again up to neurodegenerative field. So yeah, gut is it's a bit of an untapped space in terms of our understanding, but it might as well be gateway into decades of super productive R&D and research when it comes to age-related disease treatments, and what's most important, prevention. Right, prevention in longevity in general. Right, so you first and foremost you try to prevent things over treating things. Right, because preventing something is actually much easier than tackling it when it's already happening.
Right.
So gut might be as well one of the answers to how we prevent diseases from happening in the first place.
Right. Wow.
So I'm pretty excited.
Wow. That's great. And there should be more investment in gut health. That should be. Do you like kombucha? I love kombucha.
So kombucha is it's not always so. Kombucha kind of falls into the same category as kimchi and all the other fermented foods, right? The general common sense is you should consume fermented foods every day, at least once. So be it kombucha, be it kimchi, be it fermented whatever, mushrooms, whatever that is, your gut would be happy if you consume fermented foods every day. And you limit super processed foods, you limit aspartame, sugar rich for sure, sugar, forget about it, aspartame, rich foods. So and this is where we go into the general diet recommendation discussion, but stick to fermented foods. If you love kombucha, good for you. Just pick one which doesn't have sugar in it.
Right.
But pick the one that doesn't have sugar. You might kind of dilute a bit and dial down a bit on the taste, so it won't taste that good. But in terms of the added value, it will still be there.
Awesome. So that's great. So it's going pretty well. It's amazing, man. Trust me, I'm learning a lot. What advice would you give it to a new investor who's trying to invest in biotech, especially in longevity investing?
New investor, So longevity is a bit of a specific field. It depends on who we're talking about. I mean, if we're talking about a business angel without prior experience, I say join a fund. Join a fund, pick a team that knows what they're doing. Join a fund that is willing to share co-investment opportunities with you, is going to open up their advisory network, their resource network. Use a fund, a fund that and the team that is willing to share knowledge as your educational tool. and this is how you will not lose the money. Starting to deploy your own capital in longevity straight away without prior knowledge, without spending time in the industry, meaning biotech or pharma, before is a bit of a risky play. So you're risking actually to write off most of the money because you will not be able to differentiate between what's good and what's wishful thinking and etc. Also, most probably you will not be able to get deal access that you should get in order to even touch promising science. Right, so you will be essentially left with companies that were not able to raise because of their theses not being scientifically sound, so to say, or sound enough for bigger funds. So yeah, that will be my business angel take. I mean, if you're a emerging fund manager in longevity, I do really hope that you already know what you're doing anyway.
Yeah,
like,
right.
why are you here? Right. So
on board.
Yeah.
Right?
So you should. My assumption would be that you already have some track record with age-related diseases. But then again, synergize, be open, co-invest with the people that have done it before. Look at how they do due diligence. Look at what sort of experts they actually bring into the table. Right. So pick allies essentially. So longevity is a very it's good because longevity is a very open space. Funds like ours, for example, we kind of treat our expertise as a bit of a responsibility in terms of being responsible to share it with others, right? So without attracting more people in, without creating joint success stories, you will not make the industry grow. In order to make the industry grow, you need to be open, you need to talk about it, and you need to tell everyone why this is actually interesting and showcase the results of your work. So we're usually very open when it comes to sharing things in a healthy way. And most of our colleagues are as well, actually. So it's a good place to start investing in. If you're a business angel, just, stick to teaming up with someone. That will be my number one suggestion.
It's basically stick with somebody who knows what he is doing, or his team, maybe analyst and stuff like that.
At least, yeah. So at least in the first, at least in your first years in the industry, yes, you'd rather join a fund, and a lot of funds, well, not a lot, but some funds actually share co-investment opportunities with their existing LPs. So in some cases, you will be able to even double down on certain deals that you actually like, but you will always be backed by sound scientific due diligence and by people that spent decades in the field, right? So you are not eliminating all the risk because VC is risky per se, but you are eliminating the risk of not knowing what you're doing.
Right. So how did you end up here in VC and especially in longevity VC?
So I started as a founder when I was 22. Built one company, then built the other. Always wanted to end up in life sciences, so my second company was already in life sciences. I do not have a biotech degree. My first MA is in quantitative methods, so statistics, and the second one is in financial law, essentially. So I kind of came into life sciences as the founder. So I learned a lot as I was doing it. I learned a lot from my technical teams. And I am a big believer that if you start a business with your own skin in the game, if you start a business in an industry which is new for you, you kind of need half a year as the initial crash course to be able to understand what sort of people, much smarter than you, of course, what sort of people you need to surround yourself with to make this whole thing work and to kind of, polish your vision of what you want to do. So this is what I did. I spent, first company, second company, then I spent another 3.5 years when I joined as entrepreneur in residence or non-executive director into early stage therapeutic companies, preclinical therapeutic companies, cancer, neuro, and cardiovascular mostly. Help them fundraise, help them protect their IP. And just kind of gear up for the human phase and bigger fundraisers as they went. That's that. Then I met with one of my partners, Gary, one of my partners in the fund. We co-founded another company in secondary health data use in accelerating clinical trials, essentially. That one is now led fully by our third partner and third co-founder in that company. Is now, I think, the biggest or one of the most well-known Eastern European digital health companies. Works with all 5 major pharma, a few governments. One of them being one of the biggest UAE governments, one of the Middle Eastern governments in UAE. So yeah, I mean, and this is where we organically ended up starting a fund focused on age-related diseases and longevity, because we just happened to spend so many years in that space.
Wow, that's good. What's your investment philosophy as an investor in longevity tech? Do you focus on scientific evidence, support their ideas, and what's the deal?
And look, so there are a lot of factors that can make it or break it with the company, right? So we focus on teams and team chemistry and kind of ability to execute. Background matters, but also the internal chemistry and kind of qualities of the team members matter as well. And then it's pretty standard. It's scientific excellence. We should like the tech. We should think that the tech can be either disease modifying or at least field modifying in a way, right? So it should not be incremental innovation. It should be a sizable step from where we are now technologically to where we are trying to get if this actually gets to the market. And then you have all bunch of standard factors such as how the IP is protected, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not important in this conversation. What's important is, I think, in order to do longevity investments and biotech investments in general, there was a quote. I unfortunately I do not remember who was it who said it, that in order to do early stage biotech investing, you need to be by nature an absolute optimist, right? And it is the case. So you're kind of doing it in order to see this implemented in patients, right? So every ticket that you write, you are writing it as an investor, which means that you want to make a multiplier on it. You want to earn money to your LPs, et cetera, but you also want to understand how this money actually makes this exact company closer to the clinical use cases and to the end user, the patients, right? So you are participating in an added value game on the society level, and I think you're actually bearing quite a big responsibility in making the right choices and supporting the right people. Because ultimately, the way I look personally at the VC game in this sector specifically is that I have zero chances of becoming a scientist who develops something or the next groundbreaking cancer drug. I have zero chances of doing so. I do not have the knowledge or skill set to be a top-notch academic, right? But what we can do is provide such people with resource, right, and provide such people with liquidity, and essentially accelerate and fuel their intellect being applied in one specific issue, right, and hope that this push is enough, and it's normally a collective push with the other investors as well, in order to actually change something in a certain disease domain. So that's the philosophy.
Right. A very related question. How do you help company like a co-founder just connecting with the right people and advising, and how do you actually help a startup, not just giving the money?
Oh yeah, I mean, you cannot really just give the money as a biotech or early stage biotech investor. That makes no sense. We essentially let them into all of our network and resources. All the scientific advisory board members, all the infrastructural access, clinical trial centers, whatever that we have. co-investors. So co-investors that we bring in when they start fundraising again, or they're trying to close the existing round. All of these pretty obvious things we help with, right? Plus, we do help with strategy because we just saw a lot of companies, and chances are, therapeutic companies kind of follow the same pattern of development. So we do bring in a bit of this, component of you might not want to do this, you might rather want to do that instead. So yeah, all the standard. As much as I hate this term, smart money package.
Right. So, what are some of those challenges that a startup faces as a longevity startup, and then when it actually comes down to regulation?
Um, well, look, the challenges are pretty standard for everyone, I guess. So it's fundraising, it's generating the right amount of preclinical data. It's getting the R&D clearance. It's getting the disease indication right. If we're talking about the therapeutic startup, when we're talking longevity-specific tech, you also have an additional layer of communicating to the regulator or trying to adapt your technology to a disease indication which would be understood by the regulator in order to get clearance into clinical trials, for example. A good example of this is senescent cell companies, where senescent cell clearance is a process that has been proven. It is a process which has been proven to benefit in certain disease areas and certain things. The challenge is, which disease area do you pick in order to kind of make a statement for the technology, right? Because in order for the FDA to actually allow you to perform human clinical trials, you need a specific disease indication, you need a clinical protocol, you need to follow the rule book that everyone else follows when it comes to drug development. And sometimes it is a challenge because the regulators so far do not really understand aging as an endpoint, right? So they think in disease terms. So sometimes this becomes the major challenge for a longevity-focused company, where you have the tech that works, but you then try to, perform magic around it in order to kind of squeeze it into the old paradigm that the regulator would understand, because otherwise you're kind of stuck, right? Because you want to get to the market, but you cannot do it without the disease indication. And without the disease indication, the regulator will not talk to you because they would say that there are no specific endpoints that you're going to measure. So that's the challenge, because when we're talking about aging as an endpoint, as a process that we want to solve, right, or we want to solve the underlying kind of molecular mechanisms of aging, the regulators are a bit lagging behind in accepting this train of thought.
Okay. So, well, how can scientists and researchers with great ideas become a successful business owner?
Yeah, team up with someone with entrepreneurial mindset.
Okay. Any thoughts on David Sinclair or Andrew Huberman?
Well, I think these are actually good examples of how you can kind of combine the commercial kind of commercial take and still be well. Huberman does obviously a whole lot in terms of popularization of different things, right? Because through podcast work, etc.
Right.
David Sinclair. So David is first and foremost a scientist, right? And he has done tremendous work when it comes to epigenetic reprogramming and Yamanaka factors, etc. I mean, David has authored some of the groundbreaking papers in our field. So, and then again, there is nothing wrong when a scientist actually starts commercializing his or her work, but it usually again happens by expanding the team, right? So there is someone who needs to handle the entrepreneurial component of the company, and scientists very often become CTOs, right? As a VC, we normally do not invest, for example, in teams that are only science-based. So we would normally search for the balance of whether there is someone who actually understands the industry side, kind of the client side. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, both David and Andrew, they're doing great work, all in their own way, to popularize certain ideas.
Of course, of course. I follow them a lot. Okay, what are some common pitfalls in um, valuation and dilution that you have observed in the industry?
Um, I think biotech has seen quite rough 2 years, 3 years now, and you do see the valuations decreasing versus where the whole hype wave was 3 years ago. Um, it's pretty much a good thing because the companies that were raising on hype and statements did not survive or has significantly downgraded their price tags. On the other hand, the good companies are still raising money and sound scientific theses. They're still raising money, but now they're more accessible in terms of for the investors to join. So yes, the valuations are down. Good science still raises money, and it just the whole market just actually got it's a bit of a weeding out exercise that happened, right? A bit of culling.
Well, true. Can you share examples of companies you have supported that already have some positive impacts in the society? You already mentioned some, but for the audience, can you mention some of the companies that you already supported? Give me some names and positive, which already put some positive impacts in the society.
AntiBiome is a good one, already selling AOA diagnostics, early stage ovarian cancer diagnostics, already in clinical trials. TurnBio soon to start clinical trials. Pre-comp personalized therapy selection for cancer patients, already in pilot mode in multiple hospitals. Increasing the response rate in patients with certain types of cancer to 60-65%, which is tremendous in oncological terms. Freedom Bio to hit phase 2 trials pretty much in 2 months. So hopefully, in a year from now, we'll be able to impact a few years from now to impact patients with depression and drug-resistant depression. So many. The answer is many. We're going to do another 7 investments in this fund, initial investments in this fund. So more to come.
Wow, that's amazing. Um, what are your big goals for longevity, and then how do you see the shaping this future of the healthcare industry?
Um, People. So our scientific advisory board is the key, I guess. So we do have pretty much key KOLs from every single segment: AI for drug discovery, stem cells, pharma, longevity medicine. So key longevity physicians, etc. So we are already surrounded by people that shape the longevity industry and have shaped it, 10 years before already, started to shape it 10 years before. So I think we're just very fortunate to initially end up in the company of these individuals.
Even though I'm having some kind of dopamine rush, but I'll finish it very soon. Just a couple of more questions, and we're gonna be done. And I'm really loving it. Like in a couple of minutes, we'll be pretty much finished. So this is your second fund you guys are going right now, right?
So LongeVC one is the first fund that is now wrapping up the investment cycle, and we will be switching to the second fund.
Okay, okay. Can you talk about the numbers of the second fund, or it's not publicly disclosable? Not at
Not
this
yet
moment.
publicly disclosable.
Okay.
It's going to be a bigger vehicle. It's going to be a bigger vehicle with actually even more ambitious investment thesis, but still longevity,
Right.
still top people. Pretty much the same philosophy. Slight adjustments on the stage of companies we're joining in.
What's your learning from the first fund, and how many companies did you guys already invested? Just a ballpark. It doesn't have to be a right number.
Yeah, so the first fund has 14 companies in the portfolio, 1/4.
Yeah.
So gonna add another 7-ish. The learnings, it's not really the learning. I mean, the major learning is, in order to make comprehensive biotech investments, longevity or not, you need to have top-notch competencies and top-notch people on your team. There is no way of saving money on the team component. So team is your biggest expense, it's your biggest asset, and people working with you are your biggest asset in terms of the knowledge they provide. There is no shortcut around it. So really, biotech is the industry that is super prone to wishful thinking from founders, from everyone. So your ability to assess early data, theoretically assess data, is of paramount importance. That's the major learning. We kind of knew it before. We found the proof for it again, practically. So, and this is why we built the team the way we built it.
Right. So aside from VC, tell me a little bit about Sergey as a person, not the VC.
Sergey as a person, yeah. Look, I mean, I might not be like the best ad when it comes to longevity industry in general. So I do not take supplements. I do not do any of the parabiosis inspired things with blood transfusions. I am a big believer in a healthy lifestyle, so I do not consume alcohol at all. I do not smoke. I follow a pretty vigorous exercise routine when it comes to physical exercise. I do spend most of my time at work, though. When I'm not at work, I play tennis. I like restoring cars, kind of bringing the old ones back to life. I read a lot, but I wish I read more. If I wish I had time to read more. Yeah, but then otherwise, you would not find me in the parties, most probably, as this is not the format that I enjoy. I do travel a lot because of work and everything related. So yeah, it's a bit of a I have my fair share of hobbies, right? And I'm always happy to talk in a meaningful way with pretty much anyone. So I'm always happy if people reach out to me on LinkedIn or any other platforms and just ask me questions. And whenever we're in the same part of the world, I'm always happy to meet and just talk and meet intelligent people. That's, I guess, also a hobby.
Of course. If you come to New York, sometimes you're most welcome for grabbing a coffee with me, and
I'll be happy to.
I'll definitely do the second part of the interview less than a year, if you have time. I really loved the
Sure.
conversation, and I hope our community learned a thing or two. And is there anything that I'm missing? I'm not asking you.
No, I mean, if you have any, I don't think so. But if you have any follow-up thoughts, I'll be happy to address them after. No worries.
Yes. So thank you very much. I'll definitely talk to you after the video. But thank you very much for coming today and put your valuable time and your knowledge. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me over.